So far, we've spent a lot of time on the concept of situation awareness as your connection to reality. We've also focused on effective communication, and we've looked at some ways that barriers can be reduced in order to improve our situation awareness and communication processes.
I see you on 3190. Yeah, go ahead. Hey, you want me to support?
As you're probably starting to guess, situation awareness serves as a foundation for many things, and this is true for decision making as well. Fireline decision making can be a complicated business. The fire conditions and situation continually change. The terrain, weather, fuels, and people all come together in a perpetually unique mix.
Okay, you got a good head count. We got RC up here with us. Okay, I'm here with 3.
Firefighters face a wide range of variables in a high-risk environment. Decisions force interaction with the environment, so decision-making is where your situation awareness meets real life head-on. Before we go any further, let's check your decision-making ability. Take 10 seconds to look at the following situation and decide what to do. The correct action in this situation is A, indirect attack, B, direct attack, or C, disengage and gather more information. Well, what did you decide? I'm sure most of you were able to make a decision. Doesn't really matter what the decision was, you still made some kind of decision. So your decision-making machinery is working just fine. Decision-making machinery. What do we mean by that? For this vehicle's engine to start, things like spark, fuel, and air are brought together at the right time and in the right amounts to make the starting process happen. Even if the driver doesn't realize it, getting this engine to start quickly and smoothly is a matter of process, not just turning the key. Similarly, your decisions don't just happen. When you make a decision, you follow a process, whether you realize it or not. Like situation awareness, the decision-making process is fairly simple. And like situation awareness, you have the ability to open the hood on the decision-making machine and improve its performance a little. The decision process, like situation awareness, is a cycle. But in this case, the cycle moves between you and the outside world. Although there are many academic descriptions for the process, most of them boil down to 4 basic steps: recognition, option selection, decision point, and an action. And this whole process runs against time. The end result of the decision process is an action, which is how you interact with the outside world. Your action will hopefully affect a desired change on the outside world. Without your action, the world just goes on without you. That's why there's such an emphasis on decision-making in the fire environment. Errors in situation awareness lead to errors in decision-making. Bad decisions produce wrong actions, or in some cases, inaction, when action should be taken. Error chains such as this are the path to poor performance and accidents. Just as it was for situation awareness and for communication, there are tools you can use to improve your decision-making ability. To show you what I mean, let's take a closer look at the decision-making cycle. Your decision process starts with the realization or recognition that something is wrong, or that an important factor has changed. It could be something that requires your reaction, or perhaps you decide to try and affect the outcome of a situation. In all of these cases, your awareness will start to focus around a particular problem or issue, and you recognize that some future action may be necessary. As you can imagine, early recognition of a problem requires good situation awareness. Say you're working the fire line and fail to notice that the fire has jumped the line behind you. As long as you're not aware of it, you won't realize there's a problem. If you don't notice this change in the environment, your decision process, which should lead you to action, never gets started. The next step in the decision process is option selection. That is, choosing your course of action. Depending on the time pressure and the situation, this step can be very quick or very involved. If you remember only one word about option selection, it should be experience. Now, that may seem obvious, but in order to understand how you can improve your decision making, we first need to look at what experience is all about. Experience. seasoning, wisdom, judgment, whatever you want to call it, everyone has it. A person's life experience includes many activities and skills ranging from driving a car to playing a card game to raising a child and, yes, to firefighting. Some of this experience transfers from one subject to another. Some of it doesn't. Most of your firefighting experience has been acquired through three channels: training, field experience, and pre-planning. Let's examine training first. Training is a directed or guided experience, just like what you're doing now. Classroom, self-study, and field practice are all examples of training. Training usually gives you a fundamental knowledge and understanding about a subject.
All right, guys, today we're going to be greasing the clutch spring. It's real important to do that.
You should always take advantage of training when it's offered, and strive to learn as much as you can from it. Also, remember that many training opportunities aren't scheduled or formal. In fact, they sometimes come up when you least expect them. If you don't know how something works, be prepared to learn how it does. If you know how it works, be prepared to teach it to someone else. Most of us think that training is good, but there's nothing like the real thing. Field experience out on the line, where principles and techniques that you learned in training are being applied. The good thing about field experience is that it's as real as it gets. But because field experience isn't directed and controlled like training, anything can happen. By anything, I mean both good and bad lessons are learned through your field experience. This is why the after-action review is so important. As we saw before, both good and bad performance is discussed during the after-action review. The good lessons are reinforced, while the bad lessons can be corrected on the spot. The after-action review process helps to assure that everyone learns the right lessons in the field. The third channel of experience is pre-planning. Now, you may ask, is pre-planning really experience? You bet it is. Just as an aircraft simulator provides a virtual experience for these pilots, your mind provides a simulation when you go through the process of pre-planning something. During the morning briefing, and then as you travel to your assignment, you visualize what your expectations are, what the fire behavior will be like, the terrain, the hazards, the weather. You think about what features might make good safety zones in this particular area. You think about which indicators will tell you something has changed and how you might respond to those changes. Establishing a good routine of doing pre-planning before embarking on an assignment helps you to hone your recognition skills in advance and gives you a better understanding of what potential problems might crop up. But pre-planning is not just for the new firefighter. Routine pre-planning helps experienced firefighters guard against complacency and helps keep the awareness level up. The pre-planning experience can be helpful, but it's a perishable commodity. Once reality has overcome the scope of your plan, the experience gained from the pre-planning effort is gone. That's why it's important to be prepared for things to go wrong. The better your pre-planning efforts, the more likely events will stay within your expectations. Just as the virtual experience of pre-planning stops as soon as you stray too far from your plan, your other fire experiences only transfer to new situations in a general sense. Your experience resource is only good as long as it's similar to situations you've seen before. Once you stray very far from your previous experience, either in training, pre-planning, or your own field experiences, you're in new decisional territory, and that's an important realization to make. Let's take a look at an example of this. Sue has worked all of her 6 years fighting fire here in the Southeast, and most of her training has been done in this area. She's been in a leadership role for her crew for the last 2 years, is a qualified crew boss, and has worked in this fuel type and terrain frequently. Much of her fire experience has been similar to today's assignment, a fire in palmetto and gallberry fuels. In short, she's in familiar territory. Technically, Frank here is more experienced. He's a qualified division supervisor and has almost twice as many years of fire experience as Sue. He spent 2 years as a smoke jumper in Alaska and is currently in charge of a Nevada-based engine crew. Before today, he's fought only one fire in this part of the country. His assignment today is to work with a tractor plow, and he hasn't done that before. Although very experienced, Frank is unfamiliar with the local factors. The cumulative amount of relevant experience Frank can bring to bear on today's situation is less than he's used to, and he may be at a decisional disadvantage. Although Frank can't increase his level of field experience right now, he can compensate in other ways. By seeking out a briefing on tractor plow operations and getting some quick training on the spot, Frank can improve his experience level. He can also improve his experience level through a pre-plan, especially if it can be done in conjunction with other experienced personnel. Your experience helps you only in situations that are similar to those you've encountered in the past. As a firefighter, you can be sent to places with different fuels, unfamiliar weather patterns, or where the tactics they use are new to you. So always ask yourself, am I getting all the information I need? Do I need a better briefing? Am I doing enough pre-planning for this situation? The responsibility is yours to recognize when you might be on unfamiliar ground and to answer all these questions for yourself. They say you never run out of options, just out of time. In other words, whether or not you select a course of action, the situation will continue unabated. The clock will keep on ticking until eventually you lose the option to make an effective decision. What happens during the option selection step varies, depending on the amount of time you have and how experienced you are. In situations where you have time, you can brainstorm some possible ways to approach the problem. You can identify the possible options and carefully weigh the risks, the chances of failure, and the importance of the issue. But in dynamic, high-risk situations, fully developing and analyzing each possible course of action is not realistic. There just isn't time. While inexperienced firefighters tend to be overwhelmed by the onslaught of information or time pressure and take longer to select their course of action, experienced firefighters seem to get through this process a lot easier and quicker. Although the old hands seem to make decisions from their gut or by instinct, these very experienced people are really just operating out of their experience pool, like everyone else. They just have a bigger pool to draw from, meaning they've faced more situations and have the results of their decisions from those situations stored in their head. The academic name for this process is recognition-primed decision-making, or RPD. By matching the current situation with something they've already seen, experienced people can automatically select a viable option without having to weigh the pros and cons of it. If it worked before, it'll probably work again. Because they have this pre-built reserve of options, experienced decision makers usually can handle stress and information overload better than the new firefighter. The race against time is the biggest factor that separates the experienced decision maker from the inexperienced decision maker. So what's the newer firefighter to do? Just as pre-planning is an important tool to help you recognize problems, it's also a great way to take the time pressure off your important decisions. By pre-planning, you're essentially priming your decision machinery, setting up the recognition tripwires for expected or possible changes, and then setting up possible solutions in advance so that you don't have to think about them on the spot when the pressure is on. Pre-planning isn't limited to just before a shift. It's just a planning activity before you do something. There'll be times on the line when you've got to redraw a plan in mid-stride and keep going from there. Now, except in extreme emergency situations, there's always time to formulate some kind of a plan and get it communicated. It doesn't have to be a long, elaborate process. It just has to cover the critical aspects of the task at hand.
Fire's starting to move across the drains there. It looks like it might spot. Yeah, that fire activity is definitely more than we expected today. Yeah, escape route's right up there by those rocks. Let's just head for it right now.
Well, the fire and the slope, I think we might not beat the fire to those rocks, so why don't we go ahead and take a look at the map and look for a secondary escape route.
Okay.
Look here. Last shift when I was down snagging in this drainage, there's a creek that runs along the bottom of it down into a marsh, which is right below our safety zone. I think if we get down to that creek, we'll be beneath the fire. We won't have to get above it. We'll be in a good spot.
Sounds like a good backup plan.
So let's do it then.
All right.
The backup plan those two firefighters just made is called contingency planning. Now that's important because the more plans we can make ahead of time, the more time we have later to deal with those unexpected decisions we always have to face when Murphy's Law comes into play. As you move through the decision-making process, you get to that critical decision point where you must initiate an action in order to carry out the option you selected. Now, this action might impact many people, or it might be as simple as asking a question now rather than later. Hopefully, your decision and action change the situation for the better, after which you maintain your situation awareness to analyze the new situation, look for changes, and begin the whole cycle all over again. If you know yourself, how the process works, and how to recognize barriers and errors within the process, you'll be a big step ahead on the road toward getting your decision-making machinery in top condition.